You are about to witness the devastating story of how a power-mad HOA president, a woman whose entire identity was woven into the petty tyranny of community bylaws, pushed the wrong property owner one single tiny, insignificant irrigation step too far. It all ended when my 78-year-old grandfather, a man who hadn't raised his voice in 40 years, waited until her brand-new six-figure luxury SUV was parked directly beneath the septic clean-out line of his historic ranch, and with the steely-eyed focus of a seasoned sniper, he pulled the valve. The resulting deluge wasn't just sewage, folks. It was the absolute, total, and irreversible destruction of a corrupt rain. Stay tuned to find out how one perfect, disgusting act of hydraulic poetic justice cost this HOA tyrant her job, her reputation, and her entire spotless garage. What is up, Drama Nation? If you are ready for a story of pure, unadulterated property dispute where the good guys get the last stinking laugh, you know what to do. Smash that like button until your thumb bleeds. Hit subscribe and ring that notification bell because we are diving deep into the trenches of the most entitled, ridiculous HOA battle you have ever seen. Ouch. You won't believe the injustice or the revenge. Let's get into it. Welcome to the saga of the Ironwood Ranch, a 15-acre, 100-year-old piece of agricultural heritage that had, for generations, been blissfully exempt from the bylaws of the sprawling, newly built community of the Groves at Ironwood Vista. That exemption, written in stone and recorded at the county seat, was the foundational layer of this entire conflict. It placed my grandfather, an unflappable man we call Pops, outside the reach of anyone living in the Groves, especially their HOA. But the HOA didn't care about legal documents. They cared about aesthetics. They cared about uniformity. And they cared about her, enter Brenda Vance, the newly elected, self-proclaimed, and universally despised president of the Groves HOA. Brenda wasn't just a suburban dictator. She was an architectural purist with a deep-seated belief that anything that didn't look like it came from a Pottery Barn catalog was an affront to society. The Ironwood Ranch, with its faded red barn, sun-baked earth, and crucially, its functional, exposed, gravity-fed irrigation ditch, was a thorn in her perfectly manicured side. The initial conflict was pathetically small, a mere trickle before the tsunami. It involved a single, 12-foot length of black corrugated drain pipe. Pops, using his historical water rights, diverted a small stream of runoff into his pasture to feed the grass for his two aging horses. The pipe ran along a tiny 30-foot stretch of the property line, well within his boundary, but visible from the pristine asphalt of the Grove's entrance. Brenda saw it on a Tuesday morning while taking her mandatory power walk. She didn't call. She didn't send a cordial letter. She pulled her car over, marched onto Pop's property, and started screaming Screaming about visual blight, lowered property values, and an unsanitary agricultural menace. Pops, a veteran of 2 wars and a lifetime of farm work, just stood there, shovel in hand, blinking slowly at the furious woman in designer athleisure. When she demanded he remove the drain pipe immediately, citing a bylaw that didn't apply to him, Pop simply smiled, pointed to the county survey marker and said, "This here land is grandfathered, ma'am. You're trespassing. That should have been the end of it."
Oh, Wayne.
It wasn't. Brenda's face went from indignant red to a blotchy, dangerous purple. She vowed, in that exact moment, that she would find a way to make the Ironwood Ranch compliant, or she would make life a living hell for the old man who dared to defy her. The next day, Pops received a certified letter from the HOA's high priest, aggressive law firm, citing environmental hazard and threatening a $1,000 per day fine unless the illegal water diversion was immediately dismantled. The war, which Pops never asked for, had officially begun, and a simple drain pipe was just the first casualty. Brenda Vance was not a woman who understood retreat. The $1,000 fine threat was a bluff, defeated by a single phone call from Pop's own small-town attorney to the HOA's lawyer, reminding them in crisp legal language about the recorded exemption. But Brenda's mind, fueled by the intoxicating power of the HOA presidency, spun a web of pure malicious escalation. Since she couldn't find the property, she would harass the man. The first sign of her next move was the installation of 6 massive high-wattage floodlights pointed directly at the Ironwood Ranch barn, ostensibly to improve neighborhood security. These lights, however, were strategically angled to pour blinding white light through the windows of the ranch house, making sleep impossible for Pops and his wife. When Pops complained to the city, the lights were moved 3 inches down, still pointed directly at the bedroom. Then came the drones. Brenda started flying a small fleet of camera-equipped quadcopters directly over the ranch, hovering for hours, filming every move Pops made, every chore, every trip to the mailbox. Her stated goal was to document unapproved architectural changes, which was absurd. Thank you. But her real intent was psychological warfare. When Pops tried to shoo them away with a water hose, Brenda used the drone footage to file a police report claiming assault on personal property. The police, thankfully, dismissed it as a civil matter, but the message was clear. There would be no peace. The true escalation, the action that broke the protagonist's spirit and necessitated a devastating response, came on a Saturday afternoon. Pops was expecting a delivery of specialized, feed-a-heavy bulk order essential for his aging livestock. He had arranged for the delivery driver to use the historical service entrance, a gravel path that ran parallel to the HOA's paved road. Brenda Vance, utilizing her authority over common areas, even though the service path wasn't a common area, but rather an easement she claimed control over, organized a spontaneous community event, an impromptu, unannounced block party. She set up tables, chairs, and bouncy castles directly blocking the service entrance. When the 18-wheeler arrived, it couldn't access the ranch. The driver, unable to wait, was forced to leave with the feed, an essential supply now unavailable for Pop's animals. When Pops confronted Brenda, asking her to move the party for just 10 minutes, she laughed, a high, sharp sound that echoed his helplessness. "It's a community event, Pops," she chirped, standing between a plastic folding table and a half-eaten veggie tray. "And you, dear, are not part of this community," she then announced loud enough for the entire block party to hear. That the service entrance was now permanently closed to commercial traffic to maintain the suburban ambience of the neighborhood, and she had the locks changed on the gate. Pops was left standing there, his face tight with controlled rage, realizing the HOA president had just leveraged an army of oblivious neighbors and her illegitimate authority to deprive his animals of necessary supplies and deny him access to his own property. The sheer suffocating injustice, the deliberate cruelty of weaponizing a bouncy castle, was too much. The gate was locked, the feed was gone, and Pops was utterly, completely helpless. Helplessness, for a man like Pops, was not a condition, it was a prelude to war. The blockade and the theft of his property access was the final, unforgivable sin. Pops didn't move fast, he moved with lethal deliberation. The first step was research. Spent the next 3 days in the county records office, not just checking his exemption again, but pulling the complete historical plat maps for the entire Ironwood Vista development. He was looking for a vulnerability, a legal flaw in Brenda's armor, or a loophole they had forgotten. What he found wasn't a loophole, it was a time bomb. The original development plans for the Groves had stipulated that the HOA was responsible for the HOA was responsible for the HOA. Access of all parcels bordering their community, including the Ironwood Ranch, despite the exemption. Furthermore, the septic system for the main ranch house, due to its elevation, had a dedicated, easily accessible cleanout pipe located near the property line, designed to be serviced from the now blocked service road. And here was the kicker. A municipal access easement allowed authorized utility vehicles to use the HOA's paved road to service that specific cleanout. Brenda's blockade was not just inconvenient. It was an illegal denial of utility access, a public health violation, and a breach of the HOA's contractual obligations. Pops executed the plan like a 4-star general. Step 1. He called the county public works and code enforcement offices and filed a meticulous complaint, citing the exact parcel numbers, the historical easement, and the denial of septic system service access. He didn't mention Brenda, the drones, or the drain pipe. He kept it strictly factual. His property's critical infrastructure was being compromised. Step 2. He called the septic service company, reporting an urgent blockage requiring immediate pump-out, and stressed that only the municipal easement through the HOA road was available. Step 3. He contacted his attorney not to file a lawsuit yet, but to send a final certified threatening letter to the HOA board, informing them a $20,000 lawsuit To be filed the next day for damages and intentional interference with property rights, citing the illegal blockade. The day of the pump-out was the climax. The massive septic truck arrived, and the driver, having been pre-cleared by the county, was forced to use the only available access, the HOA's pristine paved entrance road. Brenda, alerted by her nervous neighbors, rushed out, attempting to physically block the massive truck. The driver, showing no patience for suburban drama, simply radioed the police, who arrived instantly, citing the municipal easement and code enforcement order. Brenda Vance was forced to watch, sputtering and red-faced as the truck rolled onto the very stretch of road her party had occupied days earlier. And then, Pop's genius move. He had quietly positioned his old, rusted pickup directly behind the septic truck on his side of the property line. Brenda, realizing the battle was lost, returned to her driveway seething and parked her brand-new white luxury SUV, her ultimate status symbol directly on the access easement near the cleanout pipe, a final, spiteful act of defiance. Pops gave the septic truck driver a look, a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. The driver, now realizing the full scope of the drama he was in the middle of, and having been stiffed by an HOA before, gave a small smirk. He didn't connect the hose. Instead, he opened the large gravity-fed cleanout valve that ran from Pop's aging, full septic tank. The initial release was not a smooth flow, but a pressurized, years-into-making eruption. A colossal wave of concentrated anaerobic historic human waste shot out of the pipe, like a geyser arcing high into the air, perfectly timed, perfectly, aimed and descended with a disgusting, splashy vengeance, completely engulfing Brenda Vance's pristine SUV from roof to tire in a thick, vile blanket of raw sewage. The stench was immediate and overwhelming. The resolution was instant, a total, horrifying public victory. The silence that followed the eruption was the most satisfying sound Pops had ever heard. The septic truck driver, wisely, quickly attached the hose and began the official pump-out, a necessary action now masked as a cleanup operation. Brenda Vance, however, was no longer screaming. She was frozen, standing 10 feet from her sewage-soaked SUV, mouth agape, her designer clothes now coated in the foul evidence of her defeat. The immediate fallout was swift and brutal. Within hours, the video filmed by at least 5 different neighbors, and the septic truck driver's dash cam went viral in the community's private Facebook group before leaking onto the public internet. Brenda Vance's perfect, entitled world collapsed on top of her. The stench was so persistent that she couldn't move the SUV that night. The local news station picked up the story, reporting on a dispute over an illegal blockade of essential utility access that resulted in a public health incident. The HOA board, suddenly finding themselves staring down a major county code violation, potential health fines, and Pop's $20,000 lawsuit, acted in a panic. The first piece of payback, Brenda was immediately and unanimously removed from her position as HOA president, effective immediately, citing conduct unbecoming and gross mismanagement leading to public liability. The second piece of payback, the board, desperate to avoid the lawsuit, held an emergency vote and agreed to Pop's demands: the permanent, irrevocable re-establishment of the service entrance with a newly recorded easement, an official apology to be published in the community newsletter, and a check for $5,000 to cover Pop's emotional distress and legal fees. But the true payback was watching Brenda try to deal with the aftermath. She called the police, alleging vandalism, but the police, having been briefed on the entire saga, noted that the discharge was the result of a necessary municipal utility service being performed on the property, and the unfortunate placement of her vehicle was an accident of her own making, occurring on a known easement. They chalked it up to misadventure. Her luxury SUV was a total loss. The raw sewage, especially the decades of built-up sludge, permeated every surface: the air conditioning system, the leather seats, the carpeting. No detailer in the state would touch it. The insurance company declared it unsalvageable due to biohazard contamination. It had to be towed away, its value flushed down the drain. The final sweet, immediate payback came when the city levied a significant fine against the HOA, not for the sewage but for the illegal blockade of the utility easement, which had necessitated the emergency high-pressure clean-out and subsequent public health risk. The cost of that fine and the legal fees had to be paid by the residents, meaning Brenda Vance, the architect of the whole disaster, would be forced to pay a special assessment to cover the legal and cleanup costs, a final humiliating tax on her own hubris. The long-term aftermath was a delicious, lingering victory. The Ironwood Ranch was at last left alone. The new HOA president, a meek accountant, terrified of making the same mistakes, ordered all bylaws reviewed and the exemption explicitly posted in the community center. The floodlights were finally and permanently turned off. The drones disappeared. And the corrugated drain pipe, that tiny spark that started the whole fire, remained exactly where Pops had placed it. But the story of Brenda Vance needed one last final nail in her coffin of shame. She tried to stay in the community, but the public shaming was relentless. Every time she walked her dog, someone would make a sniffing noise or loudly ask, "Is that new car smell sewage?" Her reputation was utterly destroyed, inextricably linked to the septic dump incident. Her husband, a successful but timid man, was reportedly horrified by the entire ordeal, and the strain was too much. And this is where Pops delivered the final, poetic kick. He learned that Brenda was having an open house to sell the sewage-adjacent property. Knowing that a full property disclosure was mandatory in the state, Pops had his attorney send a formal, certified letter to the closing agent for Brenda's house. The letter stated in cold legal terms that any disclosure documents must include the details of the Ironwood Ranch septic incident, specifically mentioning the location of the cleanout valve relative to the property and the high-pressure sewage event that rendered an adjacent vehicle a total loss due to biohazard. It wasn't slander, it was recorded fact. The disclosure requirement instantly cratered the value of her home. Buyers, upon reading the dry, terrifying details of a pressurized sewage explosion just a few feet from their driveway, vanished. Brenda was forced to drop the asking price repeatedly, taking a financial bath that perfectly mirrored the sewage bath of her SUV. The long-term victory was Pop's continued peaceful existence on the ranch. The final secondary revenge was Brenda's total financial and social ruin, forcing her to flee the community she had sought to control. She moved 3 states away, selling her house to a sweet, quiet family who kept to themselves, and most importantly, treated Pops with the respect a property owner deserves. The moral of the story, folks? Don't mess with an old man on his ranch. He might be slow to anger, but he knows where all the pipes are buried. Unbelievable. Who needs a blockbuster movie when you have this level of real life? Disgusting drama. Want to know what the most shocking moment of this whole septic saga was for you? Drop a comment below right now. Did Pops go too far? Or was the revenge perfectly proportional? Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to make sure you never miss another HOA nightmare ending in sweet, sweet victory. Till next time, remember, know your bylaws and know your cleanout valves. Peace.